So I've just started there now. The attendees should be able to join now. Hi everyone, a warm welcome to everyone. We'll just wait another minute there as the rest of the attendees join, and then we'll get started there in 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, we have a good number there, so we'll get started. A warm welcome to everyone. Thanks so much for joining this session today. We're going to talk specifically about SDG Indicator 632. We're going to go into some detail of the methodology for those who aren't too familiar with it. We're going to then talk about some of the supports that we've put in place this year for the 2020 data drive. And then we're going to go into some detail on the reporting workflow and what you actually need to do to actually report. So my name's Stuart Warner. I'm in the Gems Water Capacity Development Centre based in University College Cork, Ireland. So before we go much further, I'd just like to hand over to each of the other participants, the other panellists. They can just introduce themselves. So we'll just hand over to Killian first.
Thank you, Stuart. My name is Killian Christ. I'm based at the headquarters of the UN Environment Programme in Nairobi, in Kenya. I'm working for the SDG 6 help desk that supports countries on the 3 SDG 6 indicators that UNEP is responsible for.
Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Grant and I work with Stuart in the UNEP Gems Water Capacity Development Centre in Cork, based in University College Cork in Ireland.
Hi everyone, my name is Nasra Mahmoud. I work on SDG 6 Indicator 632 and I'm based at the UN Environment Programme headquarters, Nairobi, Kenya.
Hello everybody, my name is Philip Seile. I'm the head of the Gems Water Data Center within the International Center for Water Resources and Global Change at the Federal Institute of Hydrology in Koblenz, Germany.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, everyone. So just to say, the purpose of this webinar is multiple purposes. The first one is to connect with those who are tasked with reporting for their country. We want to be able to introduce the methodology and its central concepts to those who aren't that familiar with it at the moment. As I said, we want to provide some updates that we put in place and the methodologies and how it's developed since the last data drive. So we're going to describe the supports that we've put in place to help countries and obviously to offer you the chance to ask questions and give you that platform. So just to say on some house rules, this webinar is being recorded. All attendees are muted and the cameras are off, and there will be a Q&A session after each of the 2 main presentations. So we're going to first talk about the SDG indicator and methodology. There'll be a Q&A session, and then we'll have a separate presentation that will focus more on the reporting workflow. There'll be another Q&A session then. And just to say, there is a Q&A function here, so please, as questions arise, do put them into the box. And there is also a separate chat function. So please do interact with us. Give us, if you'd like to introduce yourself. And if you do, if we could just ask if you could put your name, your country name, so in brackets, next to your name. That will help us to know exactly where you're coming from. Okay, and just to reiterate that the Q&A section and the chat section, they're two separate functions. So please, the questions, keep those in the Q&A box, and the chat, keep those in the chat box. So the total webinar should be about 1 hour long. I'm going to hand over to Nazra in a second to talk about the context of the indicator and where it fits within the SDG framework. I'll then talk about the indicator methodology. I'll give you a brief overview of the methodology. We'll then Caitlin will talk about the support mechanisms, and then Philip will talk in detail about the reporting workflow. Okay, so without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Nazra.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Stuart. So on this slide, I will give a quick update on the UN Water Integrated Monitoring Initiative for SDG 6, which in short is called IMI SDG 6. Through this initiative, the UN seeks to support in monitoring and reporting in water-related SDG indicators, and various UN agencies are involved. In this slide, you are seeing an overview of all of the SDG 6 targets and indicators, and which agencies are working on them. The UN Environment Programme is responsible for 3 of the SDG 6 indicators, which are 632 on water quality, and 651 on integrated water resource management, and also 661 on healthy freshwater related ecosystems. Here, our aim is to support data collection and analysis, and also support policy and decision makers at all levels to use this data. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see what happened in phase 1 of the initiative. That was between 2015 and 2018. The goal of phase 1 was to establish a global baseline data, which first required the development of methodology for the indicator. And it also involved a lot of learning and pilot testing. The outcome of phase 1 summarized in various indicator reports and also thesis report on SDG 6 are all available online. For 632 indicator, we managed to collect data from around 50 countries, which was a good start, but now in phase 2, we would like to increase the number and improve the quality of data submitted. Next slide, please. Here you see phase 2, which will be between 2019 and 2022. Phase 2 has a similar structure as phase 1. There is a data drive accompanied by support and capacity development from the UN side. But phase 2 intends to stress the building of national ownership. We do not want this to be a task that countries need to do for the UN, but we want this to be helpful for you in your countries to help mainstreaming water quality monitoring within ministries, and also to link water quality monitoring to decision making so that it receives the attention it deserves. Also, on a global level, the findings of this phase 2 will feed into key processes such as development of the World Water Quality Assessments, as well as high-level political processes. A lot of global political attention around SDG 6 issue goes to water supply and sanitation, which deserves the attention. But if we manage to collect a good data for indicator 632, we might be also able to raise the international profile of ambient water quality. Now, for those who are not familiar with the indicator 632, I will hand over to Stuart, who will do an overview of the indicator. Over to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Nazra. Thanks very much. So I'll just give a brief overview of the indicator. There is a lot to it, and there's a lot more detail about this on our indicator support platform, which we'll link to later. So I'll just go through the basics of the indicator and the core concepts. So the indicator helps to measure progress towards target 6.3. And target 6.3 is by 2030 to improve water quality by reducing pollution, eliminating dumping and minimizing release of hazardous chemicals and materials, halving the proportion of untreated wastewater and substantially increasing recycling and safe reuse globally. So within target 6.3, there are two indicators. The other one is indicator 6.3.1, which is the proportion of wastewater safely treated. So these indicators are obviously linked, and with increasing rates of wastewater treatment, you should see improvements in ambient water quality. So indicator 6.3.2 supports water management at the national level by collecting, if you can actually establish a national water quality monitoring network and collect and analyze the data, this has benefits for sustainable management of water resources at the national level. So effective water management needs reliable water quality information, without which there will be inadequate controls on wastewater discharges, insufficient water treatment for drinking water, and inadequate conservation or remediation of water bodies and wetlands. So striving to achieve target 6.3 through reporting on indicator 6.3.2 can help countries to manage their water resources more sustainably in the future. So as Nazra said, we're now starting the second global data drive. The first one was in 2017, and a report on that data drive and the findings of that year is available here, and there's a link here at the bottom. And we also, in 2018, following that data drive, we undertook an in-depth feedback process, and we sought feedback from those who implemented the indicator, but we also reached out to the wider scientific and technical community with the goal of maximizing global participation to enhance the national relevance of the indicator, and also to try and ensure that the submissions that we receive are globally comparable. And this report's available at the second link here that you can see at the bottom of this slide. But again, is available on our SDG 6.3.2 support platform. So the rationale for the indicator is that good water quality, it does not damage ecosystem function or present a risk to human health when it's used either directly or for recreational activities. Water quality that is not impacted by human activities, it supports a balanced ecosystem, has good species diversity, and requires little treatment before use. But many activities, as we all know, can, such as discharge from untreated wastewater, industrial situations, or agriculture, can impact water quality and result in poor water quality. So being able to classify water quality as either good or not good requires a water quality monitoring program that generates these credible data. And for that, and to be able to report on the indicator, you require three key critical components. You need the monitoring network in the first place. You need the capacity to either measure in situ or to be able to collect samples and take them to an analytical facility. And you also need the data management capacity to be able to handle the data that this monitoring program generates. And following the 2017 data drive, we realized there are many countries, there are capacity gaps and data gaps, which hindered people from being able to report fully during that period. So the bones of the methodology as such, the way it works is that the indicator is reported as the proportion of bodies of water with good ambient water quality. So this means that countries first need to define those hydrological units, those water bodies, and that's right for rivers, lakes, and groundwaters. And traditionally, many water quality monitoring programs, they focus on physical and chemical measurements to use. So that's what we've used in indicator 6.3.2. And we focused on the simple to measure parameters which have sort of global applicability. And these are grouped into five parameter groups. So for surface waters, these are oxygen, salinity, nitrogen, phosphorus, and acidity. And for groundwaters, it's a slightly limited list of salinity, nitrate, and acidity. And a water body can be classified as being of good water quality when at least 80% of the measured values meet their target values. I'll talk a little bit more about the target values on the next couple of slides. So this table shows the core parameter groups and the different parameters that can be used to represent each one. And it also lists here the reason why those are included. So we have recommended parameters for each parameter group. So these are dissolved oxygen for the oxygen parameter group, electrical conductivity for salinity, total oxidized nitrogen for the nitrogen parameter group, orthophosphate for phosphorus, and pH for acidity. These parameters have been chosen for their significance globally, but just to point out again that countries may use other parameters. They don't have to stick to these ones. If they had others which fit into those parameter groups, they can use those also. Now, central to the indicator methodology is the target-based approach. So the way this works is that water quality measurements are compared to target values. And these numerical target values, they represent threshold values that, that indicate whether the water quality is good or not good. Ideally, target values should be chosen to protect ambient water quality, but in some cases it is possible to apply use-related targets. Countries set their own target values, and it's the best approach is that you set different target values for different water body types. So you'd have one set for rivers, another for lakes, another for groundwaters, and that national targets that apply for all water bodies of one type across the country, they can work, but it's recommended and we encourage that countries set more specific targets. For example, based on the reporting basin district or a river, a typology. So, for example, an upland river may have a different target value to a downstream, a lowland river. There is a specific technical document available on the indicator support platform, which talks about nothing else than target values. Another central concept is the reporting basin districts and the water bodies. Now, the indicator is calculated as the proportion of bodies of water. So these can be a small section of a river or a lake or an aquifer. And as shown here, these small water bodies are grouped and nested within reporting basin districts. So these larger hydrological units, they can be made up of either a single large river basin or a combination of smaller ones. And the reporting basin district concept provides a practical spatial unit that can be used for management purposes. This is especially relevant for countries that share transboundary waters and where strategic efforts to assess and manage water quality are a benefit for countries on both sides of the border. The last concept that I want to talk about is level 1 and level 2. Now in 2017, we focused just on the level 1 reporting. So these are the 5 core parameter groups. But for this year, we're introducing the level 2 concept. And this is essentially any other water quality data that can be used for classifying a water body as either good or not good. So countries may, for example, choose to report on additional parameters, which may be linked to a particular activity within a catchment of a water body, for example, mining or agriculture. But also countries can, if they have other types of data from alternative approaches to monitoring, those can be included as well. Biological approaches to water quality monitoring are used globally. Those data can be incorporated into a level 2 report. Products from Earth observation data, they can also be included. Citizen approaches to data collection can also be included as part of a level 2 report. And the idea the reason we have a level 2 and level 1 is that the level 1 ensures that we have this global comparability. So we have something that we can compare between different countries and different world regions. Whereas level 2 allows countries to report on parameters and which are more nationally relevant, and also better reflect the national capacity to monitor and assess their freshwaters. So I'll finish there on that, but just to say there is a lot more information that Caitlin will talk about on the Indicator support platform. So I'll hand over to Caitlin there now. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. As Stuart said, I'm just going to discuss the support mechanisms available for the 2020 data drive. So firstly, we have a new SDG Indicator 632 support platform that Stuart mentioned earlier. The link to this is at the bottom of that slide there, and there'll be a link available at the end of this chat. Probably I'll put it in. So this platform contains all the support materials and services, including some guidance documents on monitoring program design, the target value one that Stuart mentioned, which goes into great detail about target value setting and setting for different water bodies, etc., and groundwater guidance document and a level 2 monitoring guidance document. So there's also other resource documents and case studies and a link to the help desk and a frequently asked questions section. Over the next coming months, the resources available on this support platform will grow. And this platform will be helpful if you have a query. You can check whether it could be answered by one of our documents available there, or whether it has been answered in the frequently asked questions section. If not, you can contact the help desk at sdg632@un.org. So on the next slide, we have the optional target values. So in the 2017 data drive, the range of target values that were used was very wide. The questions were numerous about what target values to use, what was most appropriate, and how to generate your own target values. So based on the feedback received, we devised some optional target values that countries could use if they didn't have their own. So again, there's a document on the support platform specifically about target values that you can have a read of if you want more information. This slide comes from that document. So these are the optional target values that we've devised, and they can be used if a country doesn't have their own, or if a country doesn't have enough data to calculate their own target values, which would be preferable if the data was available, as Stuart mentioned, to generate target values for different water bodies and different regions. So with these optional target values, these could be used if necessary, but one to note that has been marked with an asterisk is electrical conductivity, where a better approach, rather than using one of these general numbers, is to use a deviation from normal rather than a numerical value. On the next slide then, we have another new concept for this data drive. So this is the water quality scorecard and confidence rating. They are generated by us upon your request after you report for the indicator. So the water quality scorecard can communicate why your designated fresh water may not have come out as good ambient water quality. In the example that is here in this slide, the water quality scorecard for reporting basin District A shows that all of the 5 core parameter groups met their target of 80% of the time, whereas the RBDB, it failed on oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus, and its salinity and pH were of good ambient water quality. So this scorecard can be determined at any level, whether it's monitoring station, water body, or river basin, to see which parameters meeting the target values and those that were not. This tool can be a simple graphical way of communicating the indicator and the information that goes into calculating it to other people. And then the confidence rating on the right-hand side of this slide gives an idea of how much data was used to calculate the score. It's important to remember that the end product of this indicator is one single number. And from the 2017 data drive, it was very clear that there was a huge difference in the volume of data being inputted by countries to generate the indicator score. So the more data used to calculate the indicator score typically means the score more accurately reflects the condition of a country's freshwater. So A+ is the highest rating, where large quantities of relevant data from across the country were used. And E- is the lowest, reflecting very limited data input to calculate the indicator score. So the confidence rating can be applied at different levels, from national scale to reporting based in district scale. So these extra tools, as I said, are optional. So it's up to each individual country whether they wish to use them or not. And then lastly, in the next slide, we have the indicator calculation support. I'm not going to go into great detail about this here now, but Philip will discuss this later in the presentation. But this time around, if a country is struggling, they can contact us to get extra support in calculating their indicator score. And with that, we'll move on to our first question and answer session, and I'll hand over. If there's any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A section.
Thank you, Caitlin. We have a few minutes now for a first short question and answer round. There will be the opportunity for more questions later, and you can submit the questions through the Q&A function. So far, I don't see any questions submitted through the system. There's something, no. I don't see a question. One question we often receive through the help desk address, sdg632@un.org, is whether the defined target values apply to all water bodies. And as Stuart explained in his presentation, is yes, you can have one national target value, but you can also define more specific ones for different water bodies, for a section of water bodies, for different water types, and so on. And the more detailed the target values, of course, the more robust the indicator, or what the indicator tells you. And ideally, you have some historic values for your various water bodies to base these target values on. Well, if we don't have any question right now, then we can immediately continue with some more detailed information about the reporting template. Okay, there's now a question. How would you go about reporting if the country discontinued monitoring, say, in mid-2018? Do we just submit what we have, or is there a way of addressing data gaps? This question was submitted from South Africa. Thank you very much for this. Yes, so ideally for the reporting, you use the most data from the past 3 years. So for now, that would be 17, 18, or 19, or if you already have 2020 data, of course, you can include this. If your data stops at 2018, then you just use the data, the most recent data, which falls within this past 3-year period. The level 2 reporting that Stuart mentioned can be, we can check what other data sources you have, what other observations which could be used to fill data gaps. For that, we would then start a dialogue with the country. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that, Stuart or Philip.
I could just jump in quickly on the first question. So if the monitoring program finished mid-2018, like the data that we recommend using for this period is that from 2017, 18 and 19. That 3-year period is the ideal. So again, the reason we stipulate that is to ensure we have some comparability. So countries are reporting data for the same period. It's the ideal situation is that it's data from across those 3 years. But in this situation, obviously it's not possible. So this level 1 report would use just the data up to mid-2018, but then maybe we could talk about a level 2 submission that may be augmented by some other data products, some global data products, which might be able to help fill in those data gaps. But again, Philip will talk a bit more about this, but the level 2 submission, because countries can pretty much submit anything they like, and there's no one set template for data submissions. So Philip will talk about this process a bit more in the next slide, but it's more of an iterative process, and then we talk to you and discuss with you the best way to report your level 2 data.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Stuart. We have another question from Cecily from Zimbabwe. When is the deadline for level 2 reporting? 2017 was quite simple, but the level 2 one is a bit complex. For now, the initial deadline for the level 1 reporting also in general is that we have given as the end of this month. So, but for that, we would just, that is not the final date. We would ask each country to work on the draft submission at least until then, compile some data, start working with the template to see how this is going. And then you can work together with the help desk to finalize the submission and work on the quality assurance. So ideally, the first step of the level 2 reporting is a simple questionnaire. So it would be great if that could be also filled by the end of July, so that then when we start with the quality assurance and with the feedback for the first submission of the level 1 reporting, we can see what level 2, how level 2 might be able to complement the reporting. And yes, as I said, the first step for level 2 reporting is relatively simple. It's the online questionnaire for which we shared the link with you. Then there we have a question from Jackie from South Africa. If the geological extent of our surface water districts and groundwater districts differ, can we aggregate at national level to get a national figure? Stuart, do you want to come in here?
Yep, that's a very good question. That's something that arose last time, especially countries from arid regions who didn't really have any significant surface waters but had very significant groundwaters. So we did say that this time countries, if they only have one, they can just report by aquifer-based units rather than being forced into these surface water-based hydrological units. But if a country has both, the easiest way is to make sure everything can be submitted together and integrated, is that if a groundwater-based unit, if it crosses a river basin, RBD, reporting basin district, that aquifer unit is dissected down the middle, and then one portion is reported with one river basin, reporting basin, and the other part with the other reporting basin. So it is kind of fitting a round peg into a square hole slightly, but it does mean that the single one report can be submitted.
Okay, thanks. And one more question from Australia. What is the final product to be presented on the UN SDG 6 website? I think this refers to the UN water data portal for SDG 6. There will be a data portal which represents all the collected data for the different SDG 6 indicators, and of course the data that has been collected for 632 will also be submitted there or visible there. So for each country, the indicator that has been calculated will be displayed there. It won't display disaggregated data, and where possible regional aggregations, if for a world region like Asia enough data has been collected, then there will be some regional aggregations. Okay, I think with this we can continue now with some more detailed information about the reporting template, which is used to submit the data for 632. And for that, I'm handing over to Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Kilian. And in this next part, I'll go a bit more into the reporting workflow and the contents of the reporting templates and the structure, how you can enter data in there. But before I go in there, maybe just as a quick note, as an answer to the last question on what data is actually going to be shown internationally with respect to 632. Globally in the UNSD database and also on the UN Water SDG portal, it's both the national indicator, the overall indicator, as well as the disaggregated indicator values per water body type for river water bodies, groundwater bodies, and lake water bodies, just to clarify that. Everything else, which is more detailed, will be used by UNEP internally for additional analysis, and will go into the subsequent indicator report. But I'll stop here and will now continue with giving you some more background information on the content of the reporting template for level 1 that you have been sent to. And this reporting template as an Excel spreadsheet consists of 16 tables, but only 4 or 5 require you to enter data depending on the level of reporting that you select and that you prefer. The other tables are for information and reference only. And on this slide here, you see these tables listed with their color reflecting their appearance within the template. And on the top, you see the first 3 tables, which provide general information. And the overview table describes the structure of the template and provides you with some guidance on data entry. The second table on concepts describes the concepts and terms that have been used throughout the template. And the third general information table, data descriptions, describes the data formats of the different cells that are in the reporting template and where you need to enter data actually. And then in the middle of that slide, in that green box, there follow 5 sheets which contains tables for data entry. And in step 1, you're required to enter information, metadata on the actual data submission. And this is general information about the country, organization, and the individual who's submitting the data. And it is also important to note that here you can enter, or you need to select the reporting type. So whether you report on the level of the single water bodies aggregated at the reporting basin district levels, or just nationally. So then, depending on which reporting type you have selected on this sheet, one of the following 3 tables is activated for data entry. So that is either the table national water quality, where you can enter indicator results if you have selected the national reporting type. This is depicted here as step 2A. Step 2B would be available if you select the reporting type reporting basin district. And the table water body, water quality, is activated if you select the reporting type water body. And finally, in step 3, this is the last reporting table where you can enter information on the target values, which were used for the calculation of the indicator. And at the very bottom, you see a gray box with code lists. That's a couple of different sheets that define permittable entries throughout the template, such as country names, water body types, parameters, and units of measurement. Well, So sorry, now we jump through. That was one too far. Okay, now we're back on track. Sorry for that. On this slide, and before I'll provide some more guidance on how to enter data in these reporting tables, on this slide, I'll give you some background information on the data validation and quality checks that we have been built into the reporting template in order to ensure correct data entry. And this includes the validation of the correct data format. For example, as you see on the left side, the permitted range of numerical values that you can enter. That also includes the referential integrity of related items that need to be entered, as well as drop-down selections from the code lists that I've just mentioned, as shown here on the right side, for the selection of transboundary river basin names. And if data are entered manually and contain an error, you will see an error message with information about the required format, as shown here on the lower left side, or any other error that's applicable. However, if you enter the data by copy and pasting data into, then you will bypass this data validation checks, and therefore you should be cautious when you do copy that into it. We will perform automatic quality checks up on the submission of the data, and if we encounter anything, we'll get back to the data providers anyway. In these next slides, I will further give you information on how to enter data, and I'll start with the first step on the submission information, where you need to enter details on the country and person that submits the indicator results in this worksheet. First, you start with entering the name of your country. And here it's important that you enter the English short name of your country according to the ISO 3166 standard. And this can be ensured by either selecting the country name from the drop-down list, as shown here in the middle of the slide, or by copying the correct country name from the table in the code list CL country into this field. And this conformity of the country name to this standard is very important for us to ensure the error-free data processing in the subsequent steps. Following the country name, please enter then the name of your organization, the name of the individual submitting the data, as well as a contact email. Furthermore, here you can enter the reporting year, and you can select the year 2020 for the current data drive, but you can also submit indicator results retrospectively for the last data drive that took place in 2017. If you haven't submitted data in the past, or if you would like to replace the results from the previous reporting due to additional data, for example. Finally, please select the spatial disaggregation level for your indicator submission by selecting the appropriate entry for the reporting type. And this is a new feature during this data drive. Now you have the opportunity to decide on which spatial unit you want to report your indicator results. And there are 3 different reporting types that you can select on. The water bodies are the finest scale, which are newly introduced here. It's the finest resolution, and these can then be aggregated to coarser spatial scales, such as the reporting basin districts, and finally also to the national level. It is here also important to note that the reporting on a less detailed scale, like the national reporting type, may require more work on your end because you have to aggregate the results from the water body all the way to the national scale. The choice of the reporting types, which of the following three tables you will need to populate the indicator data, is the national water quality, the reporting basin district water quality, or the water body water quality. And the couple of upcoming slides will provide you with more details on how you can enter data into these tables. There's also some demonstration video available on the SDG Indicator support platform that you can have a look at. Now we'll start with the example of the causes scale of aggregation, namely the national water quality, the national reporting type. And when you select this reporting type, you should switch to the table national water quality. And here you will find only a couple of rows where you need to enter data. The first column on country code show the ISO 3166 alpha 2 code of your country if you have entered your country name in the table submission information correctly. Then in the next step, please enter the begin and the end year of the assessment period of the data that you have been using to calculate the indicator. In the next three columns, please enter the number of the water bodies that you have used nationally to assess the water quality, separated by the water body type, namely lakes, rivers, and groundwater. Then please follow with entering the percentage of assessed water bodies with good quality. So again, it's split by the water body type, either lakes, rivers, or groundwater. In the following couple of columns, we would also ask you to enter additional metadata on the number of monitoring locations, the number of monitoring values, and the number of core parameter groups that have been used to calculate the water quality indicator at national scale. All of those ones, again, differentiated by the water body type. Just to give you an example here for the number of core parameter groups, which is a new data entry in this data drive 2020, we would like to ask you to add the number of all parameter groups that you have been using for the indicator calculation. So for example, if you have 5 rivers, if you have for all rivers, all 5 core parameter groups being used here, enter a 5, the same for the lakes as in this example. And for groundwater, there are only 3 core parameter groups, so the maximum here would be 3. So now let's turn to the next reporting level, which is the reporting level of reporting basin districts. And the information that is required here is pretty much the same as for the national reporting, but it is repeated for each reporting basin district that is included in the submission. And it is only activated if you have selected the reporting basin district in the table submission information. And the number of reporting basins that you select during the indicator submission depends on your own choice. And very often there are already existing hydrological units in place that are used for water resource management. And we would recommend you to reuse the same units that are already in place for the SDG 6 reporting. Sorry. And each reporting basin district includes a number of water bodies which can be of different type, and they should be identified by a code and the name of your choosing as depicted here in the first 2 columns. In this example, we have used the same example as in the national reporting table, but broken it down to show how it could look for at the reporting basin district scale. So here we see there are two reporting basin districts. One is called A and the other one B. And we also enter here in the third column information on the area of each reporting basin district in square kilometers. And then highlighted here in red now, also we ask for information whether the reporting basin district is transboundary. And if it's transboundary, you can select from a drop-down list the name of a transboundary river basin. The basis for this is the Transboundary Freshwater Dispute Database, which contains roughly 300 international transboundary river basins. And if your transboundary river basin shouldn't be there, please just copy the name of the corresponding here. Beyond this column, the rest of the other columns are exactly the same as in the previous slide on the level of national reporting, including the assessment period begin, the number of assessed water bodies, the percentage of assessed water bodies with good quality, as well as the additional metadata on the number of monitoring locations, the number of monitoring values, and the number of core parameter groups. Yeah, sorry, the presentation seems to hang a bit. Okay, and in the third step on data entry, I'll give you a short summary of the level of reporting if you select water body as the reporting type on the submission table. And this allows the reporting of the highest level of detail, namely at the water body level. So the only additional complexity here when you report at the water body type level is the requirement that you need to enter information about each water body. And this should be assignable to a previously defined reporting basin district. And therefore, we would like to ask you, if you report at the water body level, that you also enter the minimum information about the reporting basin districts on the table reporting basin water quality, with a code and the name and the area for the reporting basin district, as well to indicate whether this reporting basin district is transboundary or not. And all the other fields in the reporting basin district water body table will be grayed out and are not required to be filled with data. All the other data that you need to enter then is on this table here. And on the table water quality, please enter then the actual classification results for every single water body that you have assessed. So here you can enter for each water body which of the previously defined reporting basin districts it is part of by entering the code of the respective reporting basin district, or by selecting it from a drop-down list. This allows us for a relationship between water bodies and reporting basin districts to be made clear. Also, please designate a code and a name of your choosing for each water body that you have been classifying during the calculation of the indicator. Also, please identify the type of water body that this water body is part of. So this can be either river, designated by an R, it can be a lake, designated by an L, or it can be groundwater, designated by a G. Then in the next step, please also enter the area or the length for lakes and groundwater bodies or river water bodies respectively. Also, please state whether the water body is an artificial water body. So yes, if it's an artificial water body, or no, if it's a natural water body, and whether it's a transboundary water body. During the next steps, we would also ask you to enter the assessment metadata in the following columns. This includes, again, the start year and the end year for the assessment period, and the actual quality status code, which is a binary code for the classification result within that specific water body. So if you enter a 1, that means the water body has good quality. If it's a 0, it does mean it doesn't have a good water quality. The last 3 columns include, again, the metadata on the number of monitoring locations, the number of monitoring values, as well as the number of core parameter groups being used for the assessment of that specific water body. In the last step of entering data into the reporting template, we would ask you to provide additional information on the water quality targets that you have been using to classify the water quality at the different levels. Sorry, again, it jumped. Okay, here we are again on the right slide. So in the last step, we'll deal with the water quality targets. And here you can enter metadata on the targets that you have been using for the different water quality parameters and the monitoring data. And the default here assumes that the water quality targets are relevant at a national scale. However, you can also specify and use targets at different spatial scales, including reporting basin districts, water bodies, or even portions of water bodies. However, it's important to note that irrespective of whether you use national target values or at the reporting basin district or water body level, targets can be reported at any scale here. And for us, it's quite important to have information about the target levels to get a better impression of the range of different targets being used internationally. So if you have specified, for example, the reporting basin district or water body level information on the preceding sheets, the codes of these for these different water bodies or reporting basin districts can automatically be selected in drop-downs list in the second or third column on this table. When you choose the water, then the highlighted column here, we ask you to choose the water body type. Again, using the code list, can be either R, L, or G for river, lakes, and groundwaters respectively. The next step is to specify the parameter code for each parameter. And this can be done using drop-down menus. Lastly, we would like to ask you to specify the target values, the actual target values in an upper, lower, or range target type, and then enter the targets used in the classification. Further guidance on the target value concept can be found in the technical document available on the Indicator support platform. So In the next couple of slides, I'll give you some more information on the aggregation of the data and also the reporting workflow. The level 1 reporting template is designed in such a way to capture the information used to calculate the indicator score. So following your submission, using the information reported, the indicator score is calculated by UNEP and returned to the country for verification and approval. And here on this example, show how data is entered at the water level, body level first, and then aggregated in that second box in the middle to the reporting basin district level, and then to the national level, before the final indicator score is calculated from the 3 water body types. And again, this is the final data that will be ultimately reported to the United Nations Statistical Division and displayed widely. The optional level 2 reporting provides countries the opportunity to extend the view on water quality at the national level and also at more detailed scales by including additional parameters or assessment methodologies that haven't been covered in the level 1 indicator. And we have sent you with the link to the level 2 questionnaire, and you can communicate your intention whether you plan to submit a level 2 report through that questionnaire, and also include the type of data that you have available and the monitoring that you use to get that data, as well as the spatial and temporal coverage of the data, and whether there is the intention to aggregate that data into level 1 reporting, or whether you want to keep that separate. And this level 2 report is submitted either in parallel or sequentially following the level 1 submission. So we want to make sure that all countries, or as many countries as possible, submit a level 1 indicator report, and all countries who are interested and willing to provide additional information can do so through the level 2 questionnaire and subsequent reporting. The actual workflow for the reporting and the difference between level 1 and level 2 are summarized on this schematic here that you see on this slide. So at the beginning, UNEP sends the request for a report out to the countries and to the national focal points, which are the country representatives in charge of reporting for SDG 6 and Indicator 632. The level 1 template is also completed by these national focal points and then returned to UNEP. UNEP then performs quality checks and validates the indicator score. And in case there are any unresolved issues and data errors, we will get back to the national focal points to seek clarification and correct any errors. The final approved indicator score is then sent to the United Nations Statistical Division by UNEP, which is the organization responsible for the storage of SDG data at the global scale. So then in either a parallel or sequential process, depending on the preference of the national focal point, the level 2 questionnaire can be completed and returned to UNEP. And based then on the review of the questionnaire response by UNEP, the recommendations will be made on how you can best complete the level 2 submission. There's a big diversity of possible level 2 submissions, so there's, as of now, no single reporting template that we provide, but we will clarify with the different countries on how they can best report. And for some existing nationally available water quality data, we will likely use a modified level 1 reporting template that then can be used to report level 2 data. When complete, both the level 1 and the level 2 indicator scores are then sent to the UNEP databases and will be disseminated via UNEP and the UN Water data portals. During the feedback process that Stuart already has mentioned in his part of the presentation, after the first global data drive in 2017, several countries asked for additional support in calculating the indicators. So we have decided to also provide an indicator calculation support. This, as well as other information, is also available in more detail on the indicator support platform. And we also provide the help desk function. But at first, at this point, also give you additional information on how we can support you in calculating the indicator. So if you have any difficulties in compiling the data and setting target values calculating the final indicator, you can approach the help desk, and the GEMS Water Data Center can support you if you provide us with the monitoring data, and if existing, also additional information about national target values or any other target values that you have, as well as information on the hydrological units that are being used in your country. And we will then collaboratively work on helping you to calculate the indicator. And further information on this service is also available through the help desk, so please contact us through that help desk. And with this, I would like to end my part of the presentation and open the floor for the second Q&A session, and open the floor for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, we're running a bit out of time, so we might not be able to cover all the questions now, but we will also follow up with you individually or cover the questions on our 632 support platform. There was one question on the kind of support that is available for 632 reporting. I think you just summarized that at the end of your presentation. Then we have one question from Australia on that water quality there is highly regionally specific, given the nature of the surface water systems and the highly variable nature of groundwater quality. These systems have large temporal and spatial variability, which means reporting at a national level is not a valid metric, and catchment level summaries are problematic. What advice do you have for reporting in this context? Stuart, do you want to answer to that?
Yeah, there's a lot in that question, and it's quite a long answer, I think. So with the time in mind, I just to briefly say, and that's all the SDGs are globally reported. So and it boils down to one single number per country, and in this case, as highlighted very well, it doesn't always work in every country situation. So unfortunately, the SDG indicator 62 is a single number, so we have to work out the best way to try and do that. What it is beneficial is maybe not this one particular reporting period. It might not make a great deal of sense, but if we can devise an approach which makes sense and would make sense looking at temporal trends over time, and I know Australia has a huge wealth of water quality data going back many decades. So if we can apply devise an approach which works and apply that retrospectively to historical data, we might be able to work something there. But it is a tricky one, which I'd like to follow up with after, if that's possible.
Yes, thanks, Stuart. Also regarding the follow-up question from Australia, regarding how legislation, planning, regulation, and so on are taken into account. And of course, the indicator is relatively simple to allow for this global reporting. And we can also check in a dialogue how we can bring such information in, or maybe include such information in the indicator report. But that would be an interesting discussion to have. Maybe one more question from Olfa from Tunisia. For the number of assessed water bodies, if we have 2 water bodies from the same river, should we put 2 or 1 under river 1? I think it is unclear. Well, a river or large river, large water can be divided into several water bodies, and that is up to you how you divide them up into upstream and downstream section or different tributaries. So yes, that one large river could be divided into several water bodies, for which you then calculate the indicator before aggregation. I don't know if any question jumps out to any colleague that they want to cover. We've recorded all the questions also, so we will get back to you. And then, yep.
Sorry, Kilian, just to follow up on that one, on the question from Tunisia. Yeah, the ideal situation is that water bodies and the water quality within each water body is kind of uniform, so it doesn't need so a lower number of monitoring locations is needed to represent that water body. So the smaller the water body, the better. But obviously, the smaller the water bodies, the greater the density of monitoring stations and monitoring locations are needed. So yeah, so one river could be chopped up into very many smaller tributaries or sections between 2 tributaries to create a very large number of water bodies. But each one really needs to be monitored. And kind of related to that is that question from Elijah from South Africa, also on the minimum data requirements for monitoring values. And we don't set any, but that does tie into the confidence rating that Caitlin mentioned. So an indicator score generated from many thousands or tens of thousands of monitoring values would have a higher confidence rating than one which is calculated from very few values. So that's how we've addressed that situation in this monitoring data drive.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. I think given that we're now 15 minutes over time, I would say we wrap up the Q&A session here. We have recorded all the questions and we'll get back to you. And any final words from you, Stuart?
No, just to say thanks to everyone, and apologies for going a little bit over time. We have a lot of questions there to follow up on, and we will do that. So just to say, this link here on this platform, it's also in the chat box. You'll find all the support materials that we have available currently, and we will be adding to those over time. So do check it regularly. But that's it from my side. So thanks very much, and thanks very much for your time for joining. And just to say to everyone else, from everyone else, bye from me, and over to everyone else.
Bye, thanks very much for joining.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye, thank you very much.
Okay, that's great stuff. So thanks very much, and we'll hope to hear from you all very soon. Okay, thank you.